References abound once again in the latest Star Trek Lower Decks episode, so join me as we venture into Star Trek Voyager territory with Tom Paris. Welcome to Trek Central, I'm your host Brie, and let's get into it. The third episode of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2 is titled We'll Always Have Tom Paris, and we've got Ensign Boimler fully back aboard the USS Cerritos. This week's episode is directed by Bob Soares and written by M. Willis, so let's dive in and see what we think. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. Immediately with the opening of the third episode, we're treated to one of the main running gags. This being the USS Cerritos does not recognize Ensign Boimler trying to access any systems, including the ship's replicators, and doors, and, well, any other mechanical system throughout the starship. These security upgrades are in response to the Pakled attacks in the Season 1 finale episode, where the Cerritos is totaled by the Pakled forces. It is interesting that the doors can recognize who's trying to walk through them. That part I actually really like. We're told that the creator of Fairhaven, Captain Proton himself, Lieutenant Tom Paris, is appearing in this episode. Well, as if the title didn't give that away already. Oh, and of course the fact that he was in the main trailer for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2. And we finally get to see that collectible plate of Tom Paris, which is now official merch, by the way. So yeah, if you want a plate of Tom Paris, you can go and get it. There's also a pretty neat reference to that Voyager episode. And yeah, of course I do mean Threshold. So if you know, you know. Ensign Boimler is being his nerdy self as usual and collecting all the plates. And he even references Voyager as Voy. Voy being the series abbreviation of Star Trek Voyager, VOY. Which, of course, Trekkies usually use when talking and discussing the series. Now, if you're wondering where the whole plate thing comes from, well, a few years ago, you actually could collect authentic original series plates. And, well, it appears that the Lower Decks creators are referencing that with this episode, given that you can also get merch like this once again. Boimler says he's had his plate signed from Janeway all the way down to Kim, hinting that Kim is still an ensign as of 2380 or 81. Boimler may have hummed the TNG theme last season, but this season he's humming the Voyager theme. Due to the stubbornness of Boimler and him not being recognized by the computer, Boimler decides instead of simply asking to be put back into the system, to crawl his way from the lower decks to the bridge in order to meet Tom Paris and get his plate signed. This leads to the Tom Paris plate scene, where Boimler starts to inhale some gas while in the tubes. Boimler finally makes his way to the bridge, but in doing so he looks pretty bad, and very similar to a Kazon, in which Tom Paris, in immediate reflex, just decides to attack Boimler, you know, just in case he's a Kazon, in the Alpha Quadrant. On to the best part of the ship's story, yes, Lieutenant Shax is back and alive, apparently. On a serious note, this was originally shown briefly in one of the Lower Decks trailers, now the third episode officially confirms it. Somehow, Shax is back alive in the episode, and Ensign Rutherford sets himself to the task of finding out how bridge officers like Shax are always coming back from the dead. I mean, okay, think about it. Main characters typically die in Star Trek, then magically come back thanks to some cosmic forces. Some of these forces are even mentioned in the episode, from restored Katras like Spock to mirror universe switcheroos like Philippa Georgiou. Shax went through something, but you know, he didn't lose that killer Servant racquetball. I wonder if he also wears weird space spandex outfits like Dr. Bashir wore. There is a nice scene where Rutherford is trying to imagine all the possibilities of Shax coming back to life, and we get to see Shax in an Enterprise jumpsuit uniform, which is actually really nice to see. Rutherford eventually decides to ask Shax directly, and we hear the story of the Black Mountain. Well, okay, we don't really get to hear anything more about it since it traumatizes our baby bear Rutherford, but he does say something about fighting visages of himself. And I do wonder if the Black Mountain is some part of Bajoran spirituality, which would be really interesting to explore. The B-plot of this episode follows Tendi and Mariner. Finally, we get to see that combo which fans have been waiting for since season 1. I do hope season 2 carries on the mixing up of Lower Decks pairs for each episode, cause, it's really nice to see. Chief Medical Officer of the USS Cerritos, Dr. Ta'ana, is dispatching Ensign Tendi on a personal mission. Given that Tendi is seeking a promotion, she takes the assignment no questions asked. And what could possibly go wrong there? Turns out, quite a lot actually. The doctor tasks Tendi with retrieving a family heirloom, it seems. The mission is on Quailor 2, which we previously thought might have been Free Cloud, but even if it isn't Free Cloud, it definitely gives off that vibe. There's advertisements for Rick Fontaine, Zebulon's sisters, Quarks, Anne-Marie, and many more. During this away mission, Tendi mentions she's a fan of Klingon acid punk, which is really interesting since we had the introduction of a Klingon band in Picard in which Kestra Troy Riker was a fan. The family heirloom of Ta'ana turns out to be a Cation libido post. A scratching post, basically. While the two officers are messing around with it, they break it, and they have to resort to other methods to get it fixed, which of course require money. We actually learned that Mariner served on DS9 before serving on the Keto, which is absolutely fascinating, and I wonder if we might in the future get a short trek of Tawny Newsome superimposed onto a DS9 episode in the style of Trials and Tribulations from DS9. I for one think that would be a great idea. Anyway, the scratching post gets even more broken upon Mariner challenging some Nausicaans to a game of Damjat, which at least they didn't get stabbed through the heart like Picard, but still. They now have to resort to Tendi's plan, which is to go to her Orion cousin, who is a pirate. Tendi turns out to be some sort of Orion nobility and is referred to as the Mistress of the Winter Constellations. While speaking to her cousin about fixing the scratching post, things again don't go as planned, and the scratching post gets even more damaged. In order to fix the situation, Mariner takes the blame onto herself and decides to crash the shuttle into the Cerritos upon their return, in order to make it look like she's at fault for breaking the post. Turns out, after all the chaos of securing Ta'ana's family heirloom, she actually just wanted the box instead. Cause, cats actually like boxes. And you know what? We found that hilarious, because it's the typical comedy gag of all this chaos over something that didn't even matter in the first place. We end the episode in usual fashion, Mariner in the brig, Boimler beaten up, this time with a black eye from Tom Paris, and Tendi showing her favorite Klingon acid rock. Character development in Star Trek can be hit or miss. Luckily, Lower Decks is doing its main and secondary characters justice throughout the second season. The focus on Dr. Ta'ana, who is one of my favorite characters in the series, was great. It really helped develop her character more than what we've already seen in season 1 of the series. And hopefully we get even more of her as the show progresses. A funny moment that was highlighted in the episode was when Mariner and Tendi go on a mission together. This is something Trekkies noted down in season 1 with the fact that Tendi and Mariner never worked together with each other directly, with it typically being Rutherford and Tendi and then Mariner and Boimler. The dynamic was expected to work well, but I honestly did not expect it to take a turn for how it ended. Then again, Mariner taking blame for the mistake and not getting her in trouble with Ta'ana is something that we've come to expect from her character. Lower Decks does that typical Star Trek thing of tracking stereotypes, and this is one of those real-world issues Star Trek always aims to address as well. That stereotype being that because Ensign Tendi is an Orion, then she's apparently like all the other Orions we've met in Star Trek. The type who steal ships, rip off people, and are slave traders. Obviously, we know that's not the case, but it's outlined and reinforced in this episode during conversations between Ensign Mariner and Tendi herself. Robert Duncan McNeil returning to voice Lieutenant Tom Paris was super cool, but at the same time, rather lackluster. Don't get me wrong, I fully understand that this show is not about cameos and such, but part of me thought that they would make better use of having him on the show. At the same time though, to be fair, we don't want to distract from the main cast of Lower Decks, and it didn't do that. Originally teased in the trailers for Star Trek Lower Decks, we finally got confirmation on how Lieutenant Shax is back in the series. And it's explained in an interesting take. His death explanation is certainly odd, but it is a fun turn and does make sense with Lower Decks. Now the joke here being that only senior officers who die know what it's really like on the other side, and they won't reveal their secrets to younger Lower Decks for fear of scarring them or scaring them for life. This is evident with Rutherford chasing Shax around the ship, looking for answers throughout the episode. It's certainly good to have Lieutenant Shax back with us, given he was a fan favorite character from Lower Decks Season 1, and his death did indeed catch many people off guard during the season finale. I really hope his character is developed even more in the second season, and perhaps we'll get to see how he's changed in his death experience. There is certainly room to play off of that if the writers want to. Overall, I'd say episode 3 was a really good episode, though the second episode still remains one of the best. Don't forget, you can watch Star Trek Lower Decks every Thursday via Paramount Plus and CTV Sci-Fi, as well as Crave. Then on Fridays, you can also watch it via Amazon Prime Video for international viewers. So, make it so. That's a wrap for our review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2 Episode 3. Make sure to let us know in the comment section or via social media what you thought of this episode, because if you're talking Star Trek, then we want to hear about it, of course. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. For now, I've been Commander Brie, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends.